We invite you to stay tuned for the live broadcast of the Wednesday evening Bible study of the Mayfield Drive Baptist Church, located at 271 Mayfield Drive, Smyrna, Tennessee. We will now join the service.
All right. Thank you for joining us this evening. We will get started just 1 second. When I get up here, we'll get started. All right. This evening we are going to continue our study of humanism, lesson 11b, and we're going to continue with the doctrine of one world government. And I'll be honest, this one we were talking before the service, and we were talking about things happening in the Ukraine and stuff like that, and what's going on. And to be honest, it's almost like we are preparing for that in other areas, but in reality, that's what's happening. But based upon our last lesson, we were taking a closer look at the quotes provided that we had. The second quote, combined with many others of its kind, would endeavor to so brainwash the youth to the point that totalitarianism would be the only alternative acceptable to the supposed awesome corruption of the United States. And that supposed awesome corruption is even more evident today. Totalitarian, relating to the system of government that is centralized and dictatorial and requires complete subservience to the state. What does that sound like?
Fascism, yay.
No. Communism. The tools of a totalitarian government are, I will never say that word right. I promise you, no matter, I could say it 15 times and say it once correctly. Propaganda is the first thing. We talked about this a little bit. Propaganda. What do we see today? The media. Propaganda. You know, honestly, with your cell phone or your computer, you have so much media that you are able to access. And the vast majority of it is biased to one degree or another, in one way or another. It's either biased to liberalism or biased to conservatism. Both. But the thing is that both are embedded with humanism, whether it's conservative, whether it's liberal. They're both embedded with humanism and are both pushing toward the same place. Second thing that this type of government uses is police terror. What do we have today? We don't have police terror, but they're pushing it that everyone to be scared of the police.
Well, also,
and the police are like, what are you scared of us for?
using the FBI and the CIA as weapons.
Using our intelligence services as weapons. That is correct. Using them as weapons. And if you look at communist countries, all of them are used as weapons. The next thing is censorship. What do we see today? Censorship of the media, right? And things that we say, we broadcast our services online. We broadcast our services on the air, on the radio as well, online radio. But the thing is, censorship can shut us down. Not just censorship by the specific companies that we use to broadcast, but also governments. There are things that we say that aren't allowed in certain governments. I'll never forget when I was in China and I tried to, I don't remember what I was trying to do. I was trying to watch a show or something, and I couldn't access it. I could get on our virtual private network. I could access my emails and things like that. But some of the websites that we used for work, we couldn't access from China. Why? Because they censor what you have access to. Very hard. Indoctrination. We've seen that, and we've been discussing indoctrination. Huge. Now, I'm not denying that corruption does exist in this country. That is a fact. It exists in every government, in every country. But the humanists paint a picture that is grossly untrue to accomplish their purpose. Now, when we talk about, and we were, again, talking about some things going on in this country, talking about, the potential for the government enacting the draft. That's a scary word. My generation has no idea what that is, right? Brother Bernie's generation definitely does. My dad's generation definitely does. They knew about this. This was something that they were involved in at that age, right? But here's the thing. All of the steps that that would have to be taken to get to the draft are in place. But not just that, to get to that point, the world has to be pushed. Our country has to be pushed. And all of these things will push us toward a one world government. You say, how can that be? When all of the governments of the world are of the similar style of government, they're setting the stage for all of them to be united under one ruler. They will use any tactic necessary to accomplish their purpose of a one-world government. And they may not even realize it. Not able to think or see that far ahead. But we know who's in control. We know who's behind it. And the individual, the being behind it, is thinking that. Satan is thinking he's been planning this. To replace the government that exists, it must be broken and torn down so something else can take its place. We look at what is happening in our government right now. And not to wax too political, but when we look at it and we think about it and we see the corruption and we see the way our Congress is going and we see the things that are coming up before our Supreme Court and the voting that's happening and the lack of control for our voting mechanisms for our government. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I saw on Facebook the other day a memory of mine from like 2 or 3 years ago about voting. And it was about all of the things that you have to have an ID for. And the list is endless, but voting you don't have to have an ID for. But all of these things you have to have an ID for. And people have an ID for all of these things, but there's a reason. There's a reason. They have to break down the government in place to replace it. Because no one will agree to replace it until it is so bad that they have to.
Yeah, Brother Jamie, it's like what you said. My generation knows what's going on. But the generations that are coming after us, less and less they know what's going on. They're being indoctrinated into something they have no clue of what the outcome is. Give you a real quick scenario. When I grew up, we were given pamphlets. We were taught the problem with communism. If
That's
you
right.
see this or see that, report it.
Yep.
When I was in the military, we were
quit worrying about it. My generation
Didn't care.
doesn't care.
Exactly.
The next generation, my kids' generation, they think it's the greatest thing. Why? But yet their grandparents lived in fear of it.
Yes, yes.
Quotes 3 and 4, 5 and 6, the same message is being put forth. That message is one of a global system. That is what is necessary. Now, these quotes were from the 1970s, 1980s. But here's the thing. Brother Bernie's generation was already grown at that point. Who were they indoctrinating? They were indoctrinating that age right behind and between yours and mine.
When we were married in the 70s,
Right.
and I was born in the 50s.
Yes, yes. So what was happening is kids were being taught this, and the generation, that gap generation right behind you and between ours, right? That's who was being taught that. So guess what? Their kids are slightly younger than me, right? Their kids are adults now, have children of their own. They're slightly younger than me. They're in between me and my kids, right? And that generation is the last generation that will have known communism. That generation between yours and mine. They're the last ones that will really have known about it, really have learned about it, because their parents were fighting it. Their parents were dealing with it. So they may know a little bit about it, but they don't have that fear of it like your generation does. And in my generation, we were too busy raising ourselves.
We were watching movies about it.
We watched movies about it, but that's our exposure to it. And when our parents or our grandparents were talking about it, it went in one ear and out the other. I know I did. It wasn't until I started looking at it historically that I realized all of the things about it.
Made great games.
Yeah, it made great games.
You don't think about it if you don't feel like there is a threat.
That's right. That's right. Unless there's a threat, and here's what it boils down to. Unless it affects me personally, I don't care. That is the mentality that our generation and the generation after me has been raised with. These quotes were focused on a generation who would raise their kids on down to, unless it affects me personally, it's all about me. It's all about what I want. But unless it affects me personally, I don't care. Right? Communism doesn't affect me. That's China. That doesn't affect me. The Chinese are cool people. That doesn't affect me.
As we were told here recently, you have to understand the culture.
Yeah, you have to understand the culture.
The culture there is a lot different than what it is here. We have to respect that.
Yeah.
It's a,
They don't respect our culture, though.
holds a president sitting as president.
Yes, but they don't respect our country, our culture, or our way of life. Now, these quotes would try to break down all national boundaries and ties. And why is that? Because if you do not love your country, you are not willing to fight for your country.
If you don't have an identity, what are you fighting
If you don't have a country to identify with, what are you fighting for?
We're all global citizens.
We're all global citizens. And if we believe that we're all global citizens,
Well, world government sounds fine.
yeah. One person or one group in charge of it all, so what?
Exactly.
Right? If we have that type of mindset, they would destroy each and every national culture. I mean, we're Americans and we think about our country. But this is the same type of doctrine that's being indoctrinated to children of all countries.
I can't be low enough. I'm very bored of that. They want culture.
Well,
My generation.
okay, different type of culture you're thinking of.
Yes, different type of culture.
We're talking about political culture.
Different type of. But here's the thing: when you get rid of national culture, all right, you think about well, I'm French, or I'm English. You think about the food, you think about the way of life, you do not think about the political ramifications of that culture. You do not think about the borders of that country, right? You do not think about the fact that that country has a specific identity that needs to be protected, right? So like you do your family tree and you figure out, my ancestors came from here. I am Irish Indian American. What has that done? We now have all of these things in front of American. Political correctness. Well, you're African American. That means that you identify with Africa first, American second. You're Indian American. You identify as American Indian first, American second. And the only reason you say American Indian is to separate from India Indian, right? Yeah, Native American, American Indian. The reasoning for that is to separate from other. But again, all of that is designed to destroy the American culture of out of many, one people. And that's the whole reason for that. And they do it everywhere. All designed to break down national boundaries and ties and destroy the national culture of each nation.
Brother Jamie, years ago, and it goes along what we've been talking about. There was a film came out called Jaws.
Mm-hmm.
The shark was out there.
Yeah.
Sheriff Brody knew the shark was out there. 4th of July, what are people doing?
Swimming.
They're having a ball. What does Sheriff Brody say? He said, we need to close the beach. The mayor says this. If you say barracuda, people say, what? But if you say shark, we got a panic on our hand. Our country doesn't want to say shark.
No.
That's right.
But if you say barracuda,
Yeah.
what? No problem. You understand the scenario?
Yes. The scenario is don't want to panic people.
Exactly. But the shark is out there.
They support only one type of political system, one world, totalitarianism.
Yes.
I won't be able to do it again. The last quote gives full support to the United Nations. This organization has failed to fulfill its supposed objectives since the day it was formed. Still hasn't done anything right.
And who started the United Nations?
Yeah. The only countries that profit from the UN are communistic countries. Do you realize that? In the past lessons, we have always looked at biblical principles violated by the humanist doctrines. We always say, what are some of the biblical principles violated? Well, this time we're not going to look at that. Because if you remember, I stated a couple of weeks ago that for once, us and the humanists agree that there will be a one world government. Right? So for once we agree in the overall scheme of things, there is going to be a one world government. They're trying to make it happen. We don't want it to happen, but we know it will happen. So today we're going to look at how this doctrine fits into the biblical perspective. Not how it violates biblical doctrine. We're going to look at how it fits in the biblical perspective. In Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9, God gives his record of confusing the languages and dividing the people of the earth. We call it the Tower of Babel. Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. Verse 1, and the whole world was of one language and of one speech. And what's happening today? We're trying to bring everybody back into one language, one speech. Everybody learns so everybody can communicate. Spanish, Chinese, I don't know, I would rather learn Spanish than Chinese. Spanish is definitely easier than Chinese. But the the point is, what are we trying to do? We're trying to undo what God did. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Hey, they were working together. They were peaceful. They were unified. And what happened? Man had to get creative. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. God confounded their language. But why did he confound their language? Look back at what they had wanted to do. They were trying to build a tower to heaven. They were trying to reach God on their own. That's right. They had one religion. They had one government. They were trying to do things on their own instead of what God wanted them to do. Verse number 8, so the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did therefore confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. They were able to devise much mischief because they were all speaking the same language. They could all communicate. Because they could all communicate, sin involved, guess what? They're going to get into something. God had a purpose for confusing the languages and for separating the people of the world. He had a purpose. And what has Satan been doing since? Been trying to bring them all back together. To the best of his ability, bring them all back together, because he was doing fantastic. Until God said, wait a second, let's take care of this. The book of Revelation in chapter 13 reveals that there will be a one world government. We're going to go to Revelation chapter 13. And we're going to read the entire chapter. Yeehaw. Hopefully my voice happens to make it all the way through. But all 18 verses. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. All right, before we go any further, we talk about the beast. We know who the beast is, right? We've talked about the beast. The dragon gave him his power. So the beast is the Antichrist. The dragon is Satan. says that in a couple of verses here. We'll see that the dragon is Satan. But Satan gives the beast his power, gives him his place, gives him his authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. That's significant. Okay? That's significant. People talk about, oh, well, who's the Antichrist? Who's the... It's pretty easy to tell. We have a very critical clue. But we won't know it until it happens, but that's a very critical clue right there. And they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. You see what that says? They worshiped Satan. They no longer were worshiping God. They worshiped the individual. They worshiped the entity that gave power to the beast. And then they worshiped the beast. So they worshiped Satan, then they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Oh, but they will find out. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. 42 months, 3.5 years. Ooh, doggy. He says a lot of stuff for 3.5 years. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity.
Or as Brother Bernie likes to say, you following me?
Oh, yes, Brother Bernie likes to say, are you following me?
See what God's saying right there. You
Yeah.
following me?
He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Before we go any further, have you noticed something? Everything that Satan does is copying God. He doesn't do his own. He copies what God has done. Plagiarism. Nah. Worse. And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. Catch that? He did miracles like God did, and they were deceived. Saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Revelation 13 has a lot to say about the one world government. If you read through that and you look into that and you start looking at individual words, what they mean in the original Greek, you start to get a little bit better picture. Just some real quick things. It'll be ruled by the beast. The beast will be given power by the dragon, Satan. And the world will worship the dragon and the beast. There's going to come a time where no one will worship God. We wonder how this world can be the way it is. In a short time, this nation has turned away from God. 200 years, a little more than that. Since our nation was founded, this nation has turned away from God. Bears very little resemblance to the nation that was started. Why? Humanism has been all through it. Yes, the world is shaping up for a one world government. We see that in this country, but we also see it around the world. Children of God need to be patriotic Americans and stand definitively against this globalist war that is being waged in our nation. I'm sorry. It's not just being waged here, it's being waged around the world. We can't affect that. We can only affect here. To be patriotic is scriptural. Do you realize that? Not country above God. God. Country. Family. Nope. God, family, country. I know a lot of people that's country, family, job, football, whatever. God somewhere down there. And then others, God, country, family. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says God above all. And family, we're to love our family, right? We're to love our husbands, we're to love our wives as Christ loved the church, right? To be patriotic is scriptural. To be national is scriptural. Americans need to be scriptural. That's what this country was founded on, was scripture. We need to get back to where we were. In the next lesson, we'll look at the humanist doctrine of death education. Death education. You say, what? No, death education. To believe in death education, you have to believe in evolution. Because evolution means you came from nothing and evolved into what you are. Death education means when you die, you go back to nothing. So, we're going to look at that. And Brother Bernie, this falls right in line with what we were talking about Sunday about euthanasia. Abortion is death education. That's the indoctrination of death education. You think about 50 years ago, the thought of killing an unborn child was unheard of. 50 years ago, that was considered murder. You are correct. 30 years ago, was it considered murder? It still was, more or less. But you could fight it. And you were protected. And now, we are almost to the point, if it doesn't get overturned in the Supreme Court here in the next couple of years, if it doesn't get overturned, they're continuing to push to keep it and make it worse.
Well, they're going to start talking about writing a statement about Roe v. Wade. They're going to finally,
Yes, supposedly they're going to,
finally make a ruling on Roe v. Wade,
right.
which is what has never happened since Roe v. Wade. We'll discuss it. It's a very
When you look at Roe versus Wade and you look at that, there's so much controversy about it, right? But there really isn't.
no.
It's either wrong or it's right. Scripture says it's wrong.
And Clarence Thomas may be the one to write the opinion about it. Which,
All I got to say is if it is overturned, watch out. Okay? And the reason I say watch out if it's overturned, if Roe versus Wade is overturned and abortion becomes illegal in this country, watch out. We have not seen the evil that is embedded in this country until that happens. I promise you it's going to get bad. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be overturned. I'm just saying that will be a stop to all of this evil, satanic influence. It'll be a stop. And batten down the hatches because it's going to be bad.
you know, the liberals cried when Hillary didn't get elected.
Yeah, you think it was bad when Trump was elected. Just wait. It will be worse. But we're going to look at that doctrine, and as I was looking through the material, oh my goodness, it will blow your mind. Not in a good way. Not in a good way. We were talking about it last Sunday. We were having dinner on the grounds, and we were talking about it. And, brother, yeah. Not only will it blow your mind, but it will sadden you to the depths of the satanic influence that our nation is under. Because you will see things, and you'll be like, yeah, that's everywhere. And it goes right back to the very first one. There is no God. Questions, comments? I told you it wouldn't be too long. But I just want to say, going through this, and we've got this next lesson coming up. And once we finally get through that one, it may take 2 or 3 services to get through that one. But once we get through that one, we're going to go into the latest manifesto in 2003, and we're going to look at the changes from 33, 73, now 2003. And look, we're almost, 2003, we're at 22, now 2022. What's going to happen? Yes. Another year, maybe another 11 years, but there's going to be another one. And like I said, just you see the evolution of the doctrine, and it's scary. So if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and close with a word of prayer.